Thank you very much, Chief Chris, for that fantastic keynote and discussion with Sarah. On behalf of the 9th Indigenous Resource Opportunities Conference, we have a small speaker gift for you. We're now going to transition to our final discussion of the day. Please stick around. It's going to be great. The presentation is Economic Reconciliation and Community Voices, a fireside chat on Woodfibre LNG. Just a small reminder, audience members, you can submit your questions for the panelists using Slido. The QR code should be on the screens behind me, and it's also in the first page of your program. And with that, I'd like to please welcome our moderator, Selena Basi, Vice President Corporate Relations from Woodfibre LNG, and her panelists to the stage. Let's give them a warm welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. I know it's getting late in the day, but I have two amazing speakers on stage with me today, so please do stick around to hear a little bit about the Woodfibre story, and then hope to see you all at the networking after. So my name's Selena. I'm the Indigenous Relations Lead for the Woodfibre LNG project. Woodfibre LNG is a LNG project that is currently under construction. We're about halfway there, and what it is it's a realization of an amazing journey with the Squamish Nation. Before we get into the discussion, I just wanted to acknowledge that this is taking place in the beautiful traditional territory of the Sinemo people, and thank them and our hosts for having us here today. I've been here for most of the day and have had the opportunity to hear some really meaningful and important discussions. So let's get into ours. I'm very pleased to be sharing the stage today with two of my dear friends from Squamish Nation. We have Hereditary Chief Ian Campbell, SECUCM, and we have Kakalaith Deanna Lewis, who is our lead cultural gender safety training expert on the Woodfibre project, and we're going to share a little bit about our journey. So maybe just to kick us off, I can just ask Deanna and Ian to introduce themselves and any opening remarks, and just tell us a little bit about your journey with Woodfibre.
Hot Squile Tanoya, Nethlin, Cockleith, Quishamain, Deanna Lewis, Queen's Nas. I said good day to you all. My ancestral name is Cockleith, which means the cannibal woman, the big woman from the mountains. Who has heard this legend? Big woman from the mountains, yes. When I say I'm Cockleith, they're like, you're Squamish, because that's how the Squamish says the big woman from the mountains. That's what connects us as story and place. And that's where our language comes from. That's where our lineage comes from. We are nothing without our language and our lands. And so it's rightfully so to speak in my language first to address our ancestors that are here today. With us, we're never alone. My English name is Deanna Lewis, and I come from the farthest village towards Whistler that's in our valley that we reside in still, is Squamish. And I'm very proud to be Squamish Nation, to sit next to my dear colleagues here today with you, to talk about something that is very near and dear to me on gender and culture sensitivity training. And I don't speak about it lightly, I don't sugarcoat anything. And when I'm on a big project like this, you know, that's where Cockalaith comes out, the wild woman from the mountains. Our Indigenous women are important and they matter. And to be able to speak in rooms like this on topics that are near and dear when I'm talking about murdered, missing Indigenous women, it's very influential, and to see it ripple effect across all industry has been mind-boggling for me, and just an honor to live in my true self. So that's just a little nutshell I'll talk about right now. I'll let my dear chief say some words.
Yeah, Hoichka. Hi, everybody. Thank you to Snanamuk, to our family here, for hosting us. And Dallas, thank you, brother, for you and your team putting on another amazing event. It's so good to see so many of our friends here in the room. It's an honor to be here. And yeah, so Neitha Ant Khalik. My ancestral name is Khalik. Sukyo Siam Khoshamin. My chieftain name is Sukyo. I'm a recovering politician serving 25 years for Squamish Nation as one of our lead negotiators and an elected official. I'm a hereditary chief, and I continue to be involved in a lot of the projects. As we created space, whether it's LNG or forestry or land development, my concern as a negotiator was always who's going to occupy the field to make sure that these projects get implemented and that we draw in our community into the business opportunities, the stewardship, a lot of the questions that are already being posed to balance our canoe going forward. I continue to support LNG in our territory as long as it meets our metrics and our values. So we want to delve into that a bit deeper today to share our story. Hosium.
Awesome. So I think the most foundational part of the relationship between Woodfibre LNG and the Squamish Nation is the groundbreaking Squamish Nation Environmental Assessment Agreement. And Chief Ian was absolutely instrumental in that being the first Indigenous-led environmental assessment process. And I think what we're doing now is we're implementing that, we're living that. It's been very powerful and very interesting. So Chief, I wondered if you could just tell those in this room that are either contemplating or looking at resource projects within their own territory, what are some of the key lessons learned from putting that agreement, what we call the SNIA, in place? And what do you want to share with people that you learned along that journey?
Yeah, Hoichka, thanks, Selena. So, I was fortunate to be one of our lead negotiators to really develop this process, again, that reflected Squamish Nation's connection to our lands, our territories. The project is in our village site known as Swayat, and we didn't want to go cap in hand to some other level of government saying, please consider our interests. We learned through our experience through Trans Mountain and the National Energy Board where our voice wasn't heard, and that really led to more confrontation with other levels of government. We wanted to avoid that by creating the Squamish Nation Independent Environmental Assessment. So we went into deep consultation to listen to our members over a number of years, where we compiled concerns associated with new entrants in the market, being this export facility within our home waters known as Atkatsum, which settlers call Howe Sound. We wanted to really look at that relationship to our place and why entertain a new entrant in the market to get product to Tidewater to service global economy. It necessitated that we approach it in a new and different way. So the environmental assessment for us was really how to garner consent. It was really under UNDRIP and FPIC to look at, we don't want to just be consulted, we want to really assert ourselves in our territory, our jurisdiction, our authority, our governance. And how to do that, we had to create a process that has a start and a finish. It incorporated both Western science and Indigenous science to come to a conclusion whether we support the project or not. What we heard from our members were a number of concerns that shaped our conditions that ultimately led to a legally binding agreement with the proponent to really remove the ambiguity on what our vision is for our territory. As long as the proponent could meet our conditions, this would lead to a yes. So we said, let's follow this process, let's see where it brings us, and let's be collaborative in that process. So it wasn't about bringing the lawyers in the room. No offense to any of our lawyer friends here, but it wasn't about the consultation record. It was about, let's create a process, let's move together. And the ultimate result was to support the project as long as our metrics were being met. So there's a number of conditions that we had to continue to look at feasibility and viability for the proponent to make the final investment decision to move forward with the project.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think, now we're working together and we're implementing and we're living up to those conditions, and we're adding more conditions all of the time. So anytime we need to amend or make a change on the project, which in a major project does tend to happen, we need to go through a rigorous process through the SNIA that you created, Chief. And I think that's really demonstrated. We heard the Premier talking earlier around the meaningful, consultation is not the word, it's consent-based decision-making, it's collaboration, it's sitting down in the rooms, not with lawyers, as you say, but together to find our shared interest. And we've demonstrated that along the way. And one of the achievements that I know Deanna was talking about that we're most proud about is when we went to go amend our SNIA agreement to bring in our flotel, which houses all of our workforce, we needed to do that in a way that continued to evolve with the concerns of the community. And that resulted in our first of its kind gender safety programming and gender safety committee, of which Deanna and I are both members, which gives Indigenous women and their voices a seat at the table and continues to foster and respond to the National Inquiry on Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls. So Deanna, I'm honored to do this work with you. What can you share about the evolution and how we've implemented this work on a major project as well?
Thank you for that question. You know, when we were talking about those 25 conditions at first, this was a lot of the work that my family and I had brought forward to, we needed it mandated in our conditions. And it was about the gender safety. I had high anxiety about a project, especially industry, high masculine, male dominant industry coming into our territory. We're natural stewards of our lands, waters, and our women. And I know the story very well because my own grandmother was murdered in the downtown east side 51 years ago now. And it's still a cold case. I went to Houston, Texas, to McDermott, the big corporation. I put him in the hot seat a lot about this and saying we needed this mandated that everyone, short-term or long-term on this project, goes through gender and cultural sensitivity training. And it was 50 men in suits, and they were scared of me and respected me all at the same time. But it was really sharing that we all need to work, live, and play in this area and do business together. But how do we make it a safe environment for everyone to feel seen and heard on a project? I said, if I can help one person be a better person or create an ally and have people that's going to stand up for me and protect me, you know, we have 0 injury goals on any workforce. So your culture and gender safety should be no different. It can create the same harm, if not more. And so I feel like we're changing the culture. And I don't like the word reconciliation. I call it reconciliation. Woodfibre has done this. And I really commend, this is my sister. And we have amazing women on our gender advisory committee that's from our councils that are on this project. We have women that are in the industry talking about their concerns. And we have a gender safety plan, mandatory harassment policies, and the gender safety is one. We've trained over 4,000 on Woodfibre project. Let's give that a hand. And the most important part of this now is this: how do we share the success story to across other industries? We talked to the Natural Resource Minister, Kimberly Lavoie.
Assistant Deputy Minister Kimberly Lavoie,
yes.
and yesterday in Ottawa talking about this with Minister Tim Hodgson of Energy and Natural Resources. So the work is getting attention at a national level thanks to the leadership of you two.
Thank you. And having them hear our story of the success, we know it's possible. If you can make a believer out of me, you know, the wild woman from the mountains, I really hope that we can get this across all industry. And so I'm just really heartfelt knowing that this work is being done and very respected on the workforce community right now and in our own community for our Squamish Nation. It's changed a lot of pages and of ideas and idealism of what this project is. And that speaks volumes for itself.
And I think it speaks volumes for the way that we've approached this relationship. So, you know, we've heard a little bit about you can't be transactional. You can't do business in a transactional way. It's not, you know, dollars for return. So I think because of the work that the two of you did, we really uphold the regulator role of the nation first and foremost. And that's going to look and feel different for any nation, as we've heard today. But Chief, what can you tell us about how insistent you were on doing it that way, of making sure the conditions were in place prior to discussions about an economic package, and why you think that's beneficial?
Yeah, so I mean, we definitely have to always be cognizant to watch what we ask for. You want to be a regulator, then you must put on the regulator hat and structure accordingly. So it's not an easy proposition. It's one to negotiate it, but then it's another matter to operationalize it and implement. This is a 40-year term for the project, which necessitated rapid growth for the Squamish Nation to not only look at industrial projects like Woodfibre LNG, but also our land portfolio, ski hill development, forestry, hydro. There was a number of sort of volume and magnitude of projects we were concurrently working on. So to structure ourselves to create the DevCorp, to limit liability back to the nation, to minimize political interference. These were all important aspects that we looked at models of other successful nations across North America. not only in Canada but in the US, on how to structure ourselves. So the regulatory aspect was very important to us, again, to assert ourselves, to not rely on Western science alone, but to look at our cultural and spiritual connection, our relationship to Athkatsum, to the return of herring biomass to our waters after decades of absence, return of cetaceans like orcas, resident porpoise. Just a couple weeks ago, we had humpbacks breaching off-site there. This was all important to us to look at how do we then manage this. We're not asking permission from any other level of government. We wanted to assert ourselves. But in doing that, we also want to work in collaboration with the other regulators to ensure, often they're underfunded and understaffed, that we can bring value and that it's not us assimilating into some Western management practice. It's meeting in the middle to make sure our canoe is balanced as we move forward. So that was really important to us to then attract and retain the best and brightest into the nation to work, whether it's in our governance, our staff, or in the DevCorp, which is growing rapidly as well. So I think it's inspired a lot of young people, where our demographics are 60% youth. We want to attract them back to the nation to want to be educated, but not assimilated, to value our teachings. As our chief said in the last discussion there, it's really about balancing our teachings with education.
So then maybe just to build on that a little bit, I'll go to both of you with a question that is coming up from the audience. I know everyone wants to end on time, so I'll go back and forth a little bit here. So how would you say at this point, we're 50% through construction, we've got Indigenous monitors on site, we've got over 35 Squamish Nation people working on the project, but how are we balancing? How is the nation balancing economic development, all of these good things around procurement and employment, with the responsibilities to protect land, water, and community health?
I would just say from my own personal experience, I've had some amazing mentors in my life. Our elders who are now passed on really encouraged me to continue our traditions, our connections, and I'm so grateful to those elders. And I think projects like this really allow our young people now to look at it differently, that the traditional teachings matter, and building our nation and restructuring our nations is generational. So I can't take credit for this project. It's really generations of effort from when we were removed from this site in the early 1900s. Our lands were confiscated from us without our consent, without compensation. It's taken generations of effort to come back home. And transformation is in every one of our stories. The trickster is in every one of our stories. It's what do we do about that? The transformation of that site into a project that will now sustain our families for the next number of generations is an important aspect of creating a vision. So I think that there's a lot of lessons we learned from this, of course, and I think there's a lot more to be gained. But invigorating sort of our cultural leaders in revitalization, we've seen political leaders in our nations, we haven't seen enough business leaders yet. And I think that's the next iteration of growth, by utilizing opportunities like this to move beyond abject poverty and create affluence amongst our families again. We are always rich people utilizing the bounty of our lands and resources. We need to come back to providing for our children and our families in a sustainable manner that meets our values. So I think that's the balance that I see in a project like this.
Thank you, and I'm going to come back to some of that to wrap us and close this in a good way in a minute. So then maybe what I'll do is just go to another Slido question, and this one's for you, Deanna. So what would you say are lessons learned so far from this partnership, and what should future projects do differently or the same?
Well, looking at this project, I always think of like me as a mother. Your children are a reflection of you. And I say, what am I doing for my children to see that they're going to emulate or mirror those things and be their own leaders? We're only as good as the rest of our communities do it. So seeing this project and the success that it has, and also can learn from those mistakes as well. But, I call my children our conscience. And so, I always say, like, how does this affect them? And so I always look at that as a mentoring, as a way of using it as a scale to know how successful we all are doing in our lives, is how well our children are doing, as well as our elders, right? So I don't really find it as something that, you can change or do differently. It's about improving that. We're only human, and, we're all in this together, and so how do we do it in the best way we can?
We have a question here. We have some interest in the community engagement process that was used to ensure all voices were heard and considered that as we achieved the final decision. I know, Deanna, you were on council at the time, as were you, Chief. Do you want to give us any insight into that process?
Yeah, it was really imperative to go into deep listening to our community members. The existing Fortis pipeline, some of the compressor stations were right in proximity to our inhabited reserves. And the anxiety amongst our membership to see an increase in this type of product, was only heightened. So the feedback that we received from our members around safety was really important. So we moved compressor stations away from our inhabited reserves with a possibility of explosion. We said probability is low, consequence is high. Let's mitigate that. So the conditions really reflected the concerns we heard from our members. Most of them were around environment with the revitalization of Howe Sound, with herring biomass returning, as I mentioned. That really begged the question on how do you then create an export facility to access global markets while maintaining your relationship to the environment. So we wanted to go into marine use planning, which was really important to build from our land use planning, our phase 2 land use planning, going into marine use planning, but also looking at transboundary issues of increased shipping throughout the Salish Sea. Was really important to talk to other nations, not just our own people, but to consider the upstream values. We went to the Peace to talk to a lot of the nations up there to look at the source of the product that's coming down through the pipelines and coming into our territory. So it wasn't just being cognizant of our own relationship to territory, but that of our relatives as well was really important to us.
And Deanna, we know, maybe not everyone in this room knows, you were one of the councillors that refrained from signing. So what can you tell us about the community engagement process and the familial discussions that you were having, and any reflections on that period of time that might be relevant to those in this room that are looking at major projects? I'll channel our elder, Gwen Harry from Squamish Nation, 94 years old. Always pros and cons. So how did you balance and how did you reconcile that for yourself and your own family?
Yeah, so like I said, I was I had high anxiety of the project, and I live in the valley where this project is. That's where I was born and raised. That's where all my ancestors are from. And I was taking guidance from my elders and my community members. And so that was why I voted no to a lot of the project. But you could cut it with a knife even of two, it was 50-50. And we lost by one vote. And you could see how you could see the dynamics, how hard that was. But then as a leader, I said I have to respect my council's decision, and now I have to work in prevention. We had procurement opportunities, and so we have the first of its kind power engineering program for our people to not just get an entry job, level job. They're gonna have a career their whole life. And that was, my son's one of them actually. He's going for his tests on Monday. But really inserting ourselves and saying, if you're gonna have those 25 conditions, I'm gonna hold you to the letter. I'm gonna be on the land and the water and make sure this project is done right. And I really do take a lot of my guidance from Gwen Harry Ma. And she said, there is pros and cons to everything. And it's how do we navigate that together? And so making sure that this project has done with our communications, about those procurement opportunities, even the wording that gets out there now is so instrumental because there's so much fear of the unknown. So as many of these kind of conferences I go to, there's nothing more than being in my own community, talking to my community about their future and how this protects our environment, how this protects our people, and for future generations, how we are important and we're at the head of the table as regulators on this project. And it's just been so moving to me to know that we're able to have those conversations, and they're not easy ones, and but very important. And I do thank everybody for being here today, hearing what we have to say.
So I'm going to ask you both one last question, and it stems from the theme that Dallas so aptly brought up with Premier today, and that is really around family, and future generations. Everyone in this room is an incredibly busy person. I know the two of you are, and I know that your families are the reason that you do what you do. So when you think about the Woodfibre project, and I'll channel another one of our hereditary chiefs who's not here today, Chief Dale Harry, who said, when Woodfibre was a pulp mill, they couldn't get a job, quote, sweeping the floors. Now, as I say today, we have over 35 Squamish Nation members working on the project and training and developing more all the time. For your kiddos, for Wakaiston, Leolia, Justin, Seraphine, and Casey, Quileus, our kids are growing up together. What do you see as their future and the future of the other youth in the community as it pertains to this project, and how does that drive how you continue to interact and engage on this project?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I honor my parents and my grandparents. You know, they went through residential schools, and it's hard to call these schools. They're really internment camps where it wasn't conducive for creating affluence or academia to allow our people to succeed. So, you know, we're new entrants in the market. What do you do with that? It's really about our kids, to create a brighter future for them. And being a dad, you know, I have 5 kids now, and 3 of them are in their 20s, 2 of them are just little, 1 and 3. And I feel deeply honored to be a dad, to inspire them, to see my daughter in university, while the other 2 little ones are in language immersion. This is really about them, and it's about creating a brighter future. So, you know, my grandparents, before my grandma died, she said, basically, you kids have everything you need today. We didn't have anything in the 20s and 30s. You need to take full advantage of the tools that you have, and you're not assimilated people. You simply utilize the best tools available to you. So I want to continue that momentum for our children to inherit and continue their responsibilities, their stewardship, to not forget who they are and where they come from. And this project only helps them connect to a broader world, through the global markets. And the importance of our territory will never go away. The demand will only increase exponentially. So there's a responsibility for our kids to be equipped to meet that demand. Osia.
And I would like to emulate that when I speak for my grandparents. Like I said, I never got to know my grandmother, but I know her from her spirit. And my grandfather was the best person I knew. He's in Lacrosse Hall of Fame. He was a logger in Squamish his whole life. He was the best person I knew. He taught me all my morals, and he said to me, you know, you got to go out and you got to go find our canoe people. You got to go find our medicine people. He said, I'm giving you the tools to be a speaker. And like when he was teaching me my culture, he would revert to a little boy because he was so scared I was going to go through what he went through. He was very reluctant to teach me my language. And I said, you know, when I got to grow up and teach my language, I said, no one's going to tell me I can't speak my language. And be our culture, you have to walk in those 2 worlds. I speak for my grandparents that didn't have the opportunity to do so, and feel good and proud about it, and be able to look you in the eye and be a proud Indigenous woman. And for my children, again, that's a mirror and reflection. Any one of my children could stand on the stage right now, and they're going to rule the world. My oldest daughter, I call her my conscience because she makes me and questions me on everything I do. And she said, what advice could you give me? And I said, be better than me. She said, whoa, that bar is high. But Ian, you know her. Seraphine's just amazing. And my son's, like I said, he's in power engineering right now. And my youngest girl's 11. And this is the most beautiful thing is she just gets to be Indigenous. She didn't have to grow up with all those struggles. And I feel like this is a reflection of something that Wab Canoe said. If people, when they first came to these lands, embraced our culture, we wouldn't be in the severity of these conversations right now. We wouldn't have homeless people. We would, everyone belonged. I mean, we only worked 6 to 8 weeks a year to get everything we needed to suffice ourselves. And all the rest of it was for our ceremony and our celebration. We celebrated everything. My wish for everyone is to have that feast together one day this time, to feast together in unity. And so that's my gift and the treasure of seeing that through my little girl's eyes right now.
And it's really rewarding as a project to see those youth coming up, to see them on the flotel, to see the youth doing cultural dance and ceremony. And really just thank you both for all of the leadership that you're providing for your community. And our commitment as a project is to continue to see those benefits, create those opportunities for the youth, and continue to work together. Now, I know we're at time. We've hit up a few of the questions on the Slido, but Deanna and Ian are going to be around for a little while if anyone does want to catch them and talk a little bit more about their very unique experience being one of the first Indigenous regulators in this province. We are going to be the second exporting LNG facility out of Canada, and I think that's something that's really important and pivotal, and we're showing we can do it in true partnership with a very powerful nation, Squamish Nation. So thank you all for listening to a little bit about our story.
Wow, one more round of applause to do the last panel of the day and have everybody glued to them. I just want to thank everybody for sharing their stories. Ian, it's so good to see you, brother. We always say we'll catch up soon, but we don't. We both have all these kids that would probably love to play together, but we'll do that because as I was sharing this morning, when we first started engaging BC Business Council and things like that, Ian and I were like 25 years old, just young bucks, and we'd follow Chief Bill Williams and Chief Gibby Jacobs and some other of those leaders that we talked about. But to see here today this progress that they've made, nothing short of excellent. So Gaelic brother, thank you. You're always there when I need you, and I appreciate you getting here today, and your sisters. Thank you, Gaelic. It's been a long day. I know some people have had to leave for Harbor Air because we didn't have enough hotel rooms because this conference was really popular this year, but it would be irresponsible of me not to do what I have to do right now. Dan Jepson, can you come up here, please? Chief Chris Roberts, can you come up and give me a hand? Just so people who don't know, none of this would have existed without people like Dan Jepson. When I first walked into the Central Coast, Brad Roberts, Chief Chris Roberts, his dad's here. He was part of my journey back in the early days. I was a little bit younger than him. I think I'm still younger than you, but you look much younger than me now. You're fabulous. But just to tell a story of context, I know we're getting close to dinner, but when I first walked into the first Central Coast Land and Resource Management Plan meeting, there was 80 different stakeholder groups. 80 different groups who came in to talk about our territories. And I'm fairly light-skinned. I've got no problems with that. I've come to grips with it. I wear my bling-bling all the time just so people know. But in those days, I didn't. I couldn't afford it, for one thing. But I walked into this room full of all these white people who just had ideas for our territory. And these guys offered me a seat. It kind of felt like the first day of school, and I felt like Forrest Gump, like taken. And finally, these guys, here, come sit with us. So I sat down, poured myself a water, and I was just like, this is going to be interesting, all these different groups. And then Chief Robert Joseph, head of Reconciliation Canada, Dr. Chief Robert Joseph, my mom's brother, walked into the room. Chief Bill Kramer was behind him. I think Chief Pat Alford from the Numgees was behind him. And this guy leans to me and says, can you believe we let these goddamn Indians into this planning process? That's 1998. That's not that long ago. I was never been so happy to see my uncle in my life before. I walked up and I just gave Uncle Bobby Joe just this big as hug. And I just said, I'm so glad you're here. I won't tell you what I said to those guys before that, but they're underwater divers, underwater urchin divers, and not one of them have picked another fucking urchin from my territory, I'll tell you that. But there was someone who reached out to me that first day and just made me feel welcome. And we built a bit of a relationship. First it was, I won't even go into the stories, Dan. I won't go into the story of the first night we hung out together and drank too much beer. But it was entertaining. I was a big guy as a kid, so anyway, I'll tell that story later tonight at Res Dog Walkers After Dark. But, there's just someone who reached out and said, I'm really glad you're here. My name's Dan Jepson. I work for Western Forest Products. Why don't you come sit with us? We're going for dinner after. Why don't you come for dinner with us? And just that simple reach out of just, hey, this is my name. This is who I am. Why don't you have a meal with me? started this journey. It gave me the confidence to understand why we had to be at that table and why we had to start slugging it out, knowing that people wanted us there and had to have those discussions. Things changed. Western Forest Products was going through a lot of turmoil, going through some issues and some changes, and Dan left on his own accord. Dan and Corby Lamb, I don't know those of you who know Corby Lamb, but two of the most influential people in actually getting things done at Western Forest Products walked away because of how they're treating Indigenous people and other things. But Dan called me up and he says, Dallas baby. That's usually Dallas baby, how are you? I'm going to decide to go into mining. So Dan walked into the BC Yukon Chamber of Mines and said, why are there no First Nations people in here? Why is that? And so Dan started this second career of just about bridging the gap between First Nations and resource development. And he's seen it through. After he was done with the BC Yukon, did you go to AIM for a little while? Yeah? They changed it. That's right. They changed mid-flight, but Dan saw it through. And then PDAC changed. All of a sudden, First Nations people started going to PDAC, biggest mining conference in the province. And then he started going to the Toronto one, the big one there. First Nations people started getting invited, all because of this man had the gumption and the sight and the vision to understand how important it was to have First Nations part of these discussions to make these projects go forward. And Dan has just kept bumping into me. We've just kept bumping into each other. We've had this cherished friendship ever since that first night when we supported each other and had those discussions. He was in the room, Stan Hagen. Those of you who remember Stan Hagen, very, very colorful cabinet minister. He was one of the first ones to really breathe life into what was called the new relationship when Gordon Campbell came into power in 2001. After Stan Hagen passed away, we were at actually the first BC NRF in Vancouver. Dan and I are sitting there, and Gordon Campbell walked up to me and said, sorry about Stan, I know he's a good friend of yours, he's a tremendous loss. Why don't you run in his spot? Why don't you run in the by-election for his spot? Dan and I kind of looked at each other. I was like, did he just say that? You remember that? But yada, yada, yada. I know dinner's coming soon and the people got to flip the room, but Stan Hagen was given the name Claxum from the Comox Nation because he had these rosy cheeks. Claxum's red cod in our language. And so he had these rosy cheeks, and he just had this joy for life that just helped spur us on. He helped us build Namakolis along with Dan Jepson, and we just started doing all these great things because non-Native people were seeing the value in what we were bringing to the table. Stan's been gone for a long time now. He died just before the Olympics. He was the Minister of Tourism just before the Olympics came in 2010. My nephew, Curtis Wilson, who's a dear, dear, dear friend of Dan's, created a piece. Give it to Chris. Curtis Wilson created this piece for Stan Hagen after he passed away, and it's called Claxum, the Red Cod. And as we've been talking about passing things down and moving things along, this has adorned the office wall in Namakolis since we incorporated in 2007, thanks to the courage that people like Stan and Dan gave us. And just in the interest of bringing our culture to this, we're going to pass this down to you, Dan. And I want it to sit on your wall. And I want you to know how much we truly love you and how integral you were to the start of meaningful reconciliation in British Columbia. Gil Kaslat, my friend.
I'm at a loss for words. It has been just a magical journey. And Dallas and Chief Roberts were have been a very, very important part of my journey and developing relations with First Nations. And I got to tell you that the highlight of my career has been the work that I've done in that area. It's been absolutely amazing. And I'm just so honored because Curtis Wilson was such a close friend, and he passed away 3 months after my fiance died, and it was just terrible. I spent time. He stayed at my house. He stayed at Whistler. I have a number of his art. He gave me a few things, and he was just a beautiful man and a great soul. And Dallas, you've been great, man. It's been a journey, and I hope it lasts longer.
Now I'm trying to figure out how he's going to get that home on his electric bike when he's riding on BC ferries with his senior's discount, but he made me cry, so I got to be a little bit mean to Dan now. That's kind of how Dan's and I's relationship goes. He inspires me, and I keep him into reality. Logan, you want to come up and tie things up? Just again, bottom of my heart, I can't wait to see you all tomorrow. I can't wait to see you at dinner tonight. This has been a fabulous opening day, followed by a fabulous reception. Now Logan's going to talk about the rest of the evening and a little bit about tomorrow. Thanks.
Okay. As Dallas said, we have dinner tonight. So if everybody can help us clear the room, we're going to come back here at about 6 o'clock. In the meantime, we have a networking reception out in the trade show. You should all have a blue ticket in the back of your badge for a drink. Please have a stop at the bar on your way through. Otherwise, we'll see you all back here at 6 o'clock for our keynote dinner. Our keynote dinner speaker this evening is David Walcom, the former chief of the Cooks Ferry Indian Band, current senior manager of strategic partnerships with the Invasive Species Council of BC. We'll begin promptly at 6 o'clock, so please be seated at that time if you have a dinner ticket. Otherwise, we will see you all tonight at the Res Dog Walkers After Dark reception at the Coast Hotel, and then we'll see you tomorrow morning at 8:30. Thank you all so much.